Hello and welcome back to JG3 Reviews. My name is James and I do reviews of fountain pens and related things. And today it's kind of a second part in a way. The other day I reviewed the Parker 51 reissue from this year, and this is the steel nibbed version. And this pen has been met with a lot of controversy. Just as a pen, by itself, if it didn't say Parker and didn't say 51 and didn't cost what it does, just as a pen, it's an okay pen, and I enjoy writing with it. I used it some today, but this pen had a lot of expectations, and the truth is, it simply, for most people it seems, does not meet those expectations. And then this comes along, or actually not then this comes along. This was delayed. It was supposed to come out last year, but issues. This pen, though, did come out before the Parker. And this is a Jinhao 85, and it's the pen I'm really going to review today. It is a little bit different from that pen in that it actually resembles more the deluxe version of the Parker, in that it has the gold cap with this ribbed design and things. But this pen costs, I think I paid $8. I looked yesterday, and most sellers on eBay had this particular one in this color around $9. This one, definitely not like that. This pen is actually quite interesting, just on its own. So I want to do two things. I want to review this pen on its own merits, because I have definite opinions about what I like and dislike about this pen on its own merits, just on its own. But then I do want to address the similarities to the Parker and actually the dissimilarities. There is a question of whether or not this pen was actually made in France. And I and several other people took the name, it says Parker and France on the cap, and took that to mean that it was made at their joint facility in France, where Parker and Waterman do make pens. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I don't guess I actually know. Chris actually brought up, Chris Rap 52 with a great channel. He brought up, technically, that may just mean that it's headquartered in France, because Parker is. We think of it as an American company, but it's now headquartered in France because it's a subsidiary of Rubbermaid. And so we don't really know what we might think we know. Maybe it's the parts are made in China and then shipped to France. I guess we really don't know. This one, of course, is definitely made in China. So the question was, did they actually subcontract Jinhao? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. But what I do know is that the differences between the pen don't actually help answer the question. And I want to get to that as we look at the design overview. So I'm going to review this pen, but I am going to address these things as we go along. So let's just flip that camera and dive right into this pen. Okay, so let's take a close-up look at the Jinhao 85, and let me just say right up front that what drew me to this pen more than anything else was curiosity. I had already ordered the Parker for the same reason, curiosity. Would it be a great pen, a flop, or what? And I was curious enough that I took that chance, and then I decided to do the same with this pen. So I do like, just straight up, I do like this cobalt type blue lacquer. This is the same, that pretty much identical shade as what I have the X450 in, and I just really like this finish from Jinhao in that pen and in this pen. It's almost a little bit much for this design, but I like it. The cap, let's start at the very top. The finial at the top is that very familiar 51-esque jewel. In this case, it's not really a jewel, it's a metal finial, and you have those concentric circles. And then you have this ridged design cap, similar to, not the same as, but similar to the deluxe version of the 51 reissue. The clip is an arrow clip, but you will notice that there is a pretty big difference between the style, this familiar modern styled clip on the Parker, and what Jinhao has done. So not at all identical in any way. And these pens are not identical. Now, you might take the fact that they're not identical to mean, okay, then no way did they have the parts made in China or anything like that. Or a hand in, did Jinhao have a connection? Was there somehow, or did they just reverse engineer and make different decisions? I don't know. I don't know that I care. I don't know that you care. But I'm going to address it because it came up in a lot of comments. So I don't know. It's almost as if, let me just go ahead and dive into this before we get into some of the other particulars, and then you'll see it along as we go along. You won't be able to unsee it. It's almost as if, however it went down, whether there's a connection or no connection at all, either Jinhao or Jinhao and Parker said, okay, you can make our pen, but you have to promise to do everything the opposite. It's almost, when I see these pens together, it's like I'm seeing that episode of Seinfeld where George decides that every decision he's ever made has been wrong, and so he's going to start doing the opposite. And so instead of a chicken salad sandwich, he orders tuna. And, that's kind of the way this pen feels. They sat down and said, okay, you can make that the same, but make it not the same. Make it the same different. What? So it doesn't have, for example, the vented finial like the Parker does, and yet in every other way, that finial looks the same. I don't know. It's just interesting. You get to the band, and here is the Parker band, and this is obviously different. But it's more variation. Everything is a variation on the theme rather than true difference. You have Jinhao, and then you have, unusually, no model number. But see, Jinhao usually does put their model number, but not now. And they didn't put China like they put France. They just went and did the opposite. They put a name. They put a blank, it's kind of odd, and it doesn't end there. Okay, you go on down the barrel, and it is that typical, just, bullet-shaped barrel, or cigar-shaped barrel, however you want to refer to that. You unscrew the cap, which is nicely done, but not done in exactly the same way, and you will find that there is a plastic sleeve inside. I apologize, I don't have great lighting for this today, for you to be able to see down in there. But there is a plastic sleeve, and there are plastic threads. Now, here's the interesting thing. This is another one of those things where it's the same but different. It is plastic on metal. Some of you communicated in comments that you didn't like that it was plastic on metal on the Parker. Well, so is this. But, just to be different, here, metal in the cap, plastic on the barrel, whereas this is plastic in the cap, metal on the barrel. It's the Costanza principle. Just do the opposite. And I just think that's hilarious. And it just keeps going that way throughout the pen. It just, over and over again, there are decisions like that. If we open up the barrel, you'll see that those metal threads go on with the barrel. And then it is this is a metal barrel because this is plastic. And so, Costanza. Then you find a converter because this is a cartridge converter pen, just like the Parker, except that this one is provided. Of course, Jinhao always does that, so that wouldn't even have been a decision. But again, it's the opposite. It's just so odd that just keeps happening. Then this has a nice metal feed housing, and it has the band here. This, of course, is glued on, as is typical of Jinhao. So I'm not going to go any further than that. I have no need to get that off and possibly ruin the pen or the writing experience. But this is glued on, and it is an actual hooded tubular nib, as is typical for Jinhao, and is opposite of the reissue, which for some mysterious reason did not go with that. I like my medium nib in that. I'm not really griping too much. It's interesting. George just keeps popping up. So you have a completely different nib and feed and all of that on this. So there are things that are similar. It's a simple design, so there's not a lot to highlight here. But there are things that are similar and yet different with this pen. Again. Okay, so let's see how the pen actually writes. And I will remind you, it does post securely. No issues there whatsoever. I'm going to take it off because I prefer this pen unposted, but it's not unbalanced at all, and it posts just fine. This is a Jinhao 85. This is a fine steel nib. Oops. And this is Pelican. And this is the royal blue. Okay. And of course you don't get flex with this kind of a nib. But this gives you an idea. Check it for wetness. It's pretty dry, this pen. It's well saturated, and you wouldn't think that it was actually that dry, but it is. Now let me tell you something that I think is kind of interesting about the comfort of this pen. Because Jinhao did the opposite, and they put these metal threads here, this is actually a little bit more comfortable. And actually, let me look at something. There's something I haven't looked at that I think might also be, yes. You will notice that the hooded nib section is much longer on the Jinhao, and that also makes it a more comfortable pen to write with than the Parker, just by that length. Now I find the Parker comfortable enough, but this gives me, if you are a little bit of a what I call a high gripper, this is just slightly sharper in that plastic than this metal is, and this gives you more room to where you don't even have to do that on the threads anyway. And so actually I find that a little bit more comfortable than the Parker there. That's interesting. I had suspected that, but I hadn't actually checked that side by side until just now, or hadn't really paid enough attention to it. But this pen does write really well. I like the line with which it writes, and I'm very pleased with it for the price that I paid. It's a little different from Jinhao, the 51A, because of the threads. If you want that where it's just one smooth line, like with the original 51, then you would get the 51A. And it's actually a lot cheaper. You can get it with a bobby nib. You could swap this out and put in a bobby nib, by the way. And then you really got something, haven't you? That would be pretty cool. But if you want the sleeker line, then go with the 51A. However, I will say, this pen, the materials are nice. It's well made, well put together, and I do really like it. And, of course, the question would be, do you like this better or worse? Let's look at some things. Let's look at pros and cons. Pros, I'm going to start with price. I think you have to do that, right? The price is, I'm going to put $9. I've seen it cheaper than that. If you, pardon me. And if you're willing to wait, you may be able to find it for $8. I think $9 is recent. I think I actually paid $8 for mine if I look back at that. So the price is really quite good. Now again, you can get a 51A with a bobby nib for a little under that, and that is an awesome pen. This does have some fit and finish that's a little bit nicer than some of those 51As, but it's definitely still a bargain and a value. Let's see. A con on that is there is no warranty, no support. I mean, that just comes standard for the course here, par for the course, with any Jinhao pen like that. That I usually don't say that because I think we all know that, but in this case, when you're comparing it with a pen that might, that matters. Other pro is I find that the nib is really quite good. And let me do a little something here. I'm going to finish this out. This is the medium nib from the Jotter, and I actually do really like it. That gives you an idea. Their line width is really similar, so I would compare this not to the fine. I would compare it to the medium, which is a nib I like, but honestly, I like this just as well. I think that the nib is quite good for a daily driver, that you don't bake the bank. You don't break the bank buying. Really good pro there. It's comfortable, and I'm going to argue it's more comfortable than the Parker. It just is. And so I'm going to put a plus there, meaning it's more comfortable than that. Negative, I put a plus there, didn't I? And any other negatives? I guess if you really care about labels, or if you have problems with buying something from China, those would be negatives. But I don't have a problem with either of those. I mean, I sometimes buy in things from, but as far as labels, I don't give a hoot. So, honestly, if I were picking one, I would love to buy into the history of the other and all of that good stuff. But if it's just these two pins and it's money, honestly, the 85 is the one if I were only ordering one. And I really didn't want to say that. I really didn't want that to be true when I was still waiting for both of them to hit my mailbox. I like both pins outside of history and expectations and price. I like both pins. But when you throw all those things back in, that's my take. And I suppose that might be as controversial as the Parker pen itself, but them's the facts. So, God bless you. Have a great week. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing and liking and sharing all of these things. I really do appreciate it, and I really enjoy all the feedback and the conversation that we've had over this. And it's been all over the place, and people definitely have strong feelings, and that's fine, because, hey, it's all about, do you like the pen? Do you enjoy the pen? Do you think it's worthwhile? And it's okay when you don't. That's okay. To each his or her own. God bless you. And have a great week, and I'll see you in the next review.